In the last video, we talked about doing literature review. In that video, I also mentioned some of the tools that I personally use that I think are really useful for doing research in general and not just literature review. And so in this video, we're going to talk more about tools that could help you with research. And in particular, I've listed 8 tools that I think are quite useful, but there's also one bonus one at the end. So stay tuned for that. So like I mentioned last video, Google Scholar is really good for finding sources and papers that you might want to read regarding to your topic of choice. And also what's really nice about Google Scholar is that you can export your references as something like a BibTeX or other formats of citation that is really neat. And other than exporting the references, you can also copy in the auto-generated references, which are some of the common stuff that you might see, like APA or Vancouver and etc. Okay, so for number 2 and 3, I'm going to group it together because they are kind of similar in some way. So the first one is ResearchGate and the other is Arxiv. Both are also really good for finding resources and papers like Google Scholar, but what's really nice about them is it also contains the preprints, especially in recent days that people start publishing their research by their own and as something that's called preprint rather than through a publication company. And most of the time those preprints are free, but sometimes you cannot. For prints that are not uploaded publicly, you can also have a button, especially on ResearchGate, to contact the researcher and ask them to give you the paper, basically for free most of the time. And ResearchGate is also kind of like LinkedIn, if you know what that is. It allows you to connect with other researchers, and you can also message them to communicate if that's what you want. But personally, I haven't tried that, so I can't really comment on that, but that's something you could do. And I reckon most researchers would be up for some discussion because most of the time they are quite passionate about what they do. Okay, for the fourth one is Libgen. So Libgen is kind of an old website that many academics already know about this. And I don't think it's just academics actually. It's basically a website allowing you to search for books and other resources, and usually there are people who have uploaded some PDF copies of the books, and so that means you could access the books for free basically. Some of the most popular textbooks are definitely up there. So in case your universities or libraries doesn't have the books that you're looking for, the first point of contact I think is going to that website Libgen, where they usually probably have the book that you're looking for in a completely free PDF. Hi, so it's Phil from me here, and actually I did some more research after recording the video, and I realized that actually Libgen is not actually available anymore, and there's been some lawsuits around the copyright of the website. So now I think it's done, but there's still some website that's kind of similar, but for legal reason obviously I can't publicly discuss that, and so it's up to you, sorry. And back to the next item. So now for our fifth one is something that I also mentioned in the last video, and that is JabRef. JabRef is something that I personally use as well. It's a really nice tool because it could basically, you can copy in all the resources that you have used and it will auto-generate a citation for each items, and you can export it as a BibTeX for Latex, for example, or other formats for references. Now number 6, again something that I've mentioned in the last video, and that's called LitMap. As I mentioned in the last video, It's really nice to have a visualization of how each paper connects, and in also a chronological order to see how the subject that you're studying have progressed throughout time. You can also use it to find other related paper that might have cited the previous paper that you are currently reading. And so it's particularly useful when you're doing a literature review and trying to understand what has been done in the current research that you're working on. Okay, for number 7 and 8, in this day and age you've probably heard of AI a lot, and undoubtedly they are quite useful. Some of the most common stuff that you might heard are, for example, ChatGPT or DeepSeek or Gemini and etc. And I think those two, such as ChatGPT, are really useful. I will rely them for doing the research. Obviously, that's academic fraud if you're not doing the research by yourself. However, I think they are really nice as a springboard for your own research, or asking some problems for it to generate problems for you to research on, or just asking for some general direction. You can also use it for a crash course on some of the basics. For example, if you forgot some of the basics of a certain concept, you can just ask it to generate a summary for you, rather than having to dig up every book and having to look at it. You can also ask it to suggest some books or resources, and I think that's in general are quite useful. So quite similarly, for number 8, it's called Elicits. It's also a AI power too, and you can use it for literature review, and it summarizes some of the research that have been done and some key problems that you might have found. Obviously, it's not going to be accurate 100% because, well, the tech is still quite new and it's currently in development, but overall it's nice to use it to find some papers, and again, kind of like LitMap, to connect your sources and find papers to read to get your understanding on the topic. Okay, so now it is time for the bonus. For the first one, I have Overleaf. So Overleaf is something that I personally use for both my coursework, my lab reports, and also my own research writing. It's basically a Latex compiler that's online, and you don't really have to download anything or pay anything. There is actually a premium subscription that you could subscribe to, but personally I think the free version is already good enough for me. I think what's really nice about it is it's quite easy to use, because there's 2 features that I think are quite useful to beginners especially. For example, the first one is auto-complete. When you type in the start of a command, it basically suggests the full command for you, kind of like Google search suggestion. There's also the other one, graphic editor, where it's almost like Word and other text editor that you might already know. Rather than using the code base, it's kind of a graphic based editor, and you have a nice user interface that you could edit kind of like Word, and I think that's something really useful for beginners. So lastly, for the second bonus one is Wikipedia. Now, you might have heard your teacher saying don't cite Wikipedia or don't use Wikipedia. Whilst you might not want to cite Wikipedia, for example, because obviously the stuff are open source and everyone could just change it up, but as a general point, I think it's quite nice to use it to get a quick understanding of something, especially if you want to just search up the basic and remind yourself about the topic. But I wouldn't necessarily use it as a source for your citations. And a feature about Wikipedia that I think are really useful is that, you know how at the end of the page you have like hyperlinks to other pages related to that topic, and it's really useful for me personally to go into other topics and try to fall into a rabbit hole of the topics within the topics that you're studying. And I think that is a really nice feature to have, especially when you're getting started with research topic that you're working on. So yeah, I think this is the end of this video, and do comment below if you have any good suggestion of some resources that you personally use or have heard that are quite nice and useful. And I guess I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.